I'm going to be talking about SharePoint information management from the business point of view, pointers for you on setting up the information. My name is Paul Turner. I work for a small company called HP. We do printers, servers, all sorts of things, and we also have a services division. On the 1st of November, HP splits into two. So we're going to have all the printers and hardware in one company and all the services in another company. I've been working with SharePoint since 1999. So I was on the Tahoe TAP program, and I've been working with SharePoint since then. I'm an RYA ocean master, so I can sail boats out beyond the 12-mile territorial limit. I've been certified, and some people will say that would be really good for me. And also like rugby union. So that's a brief overview of me. What we're going to be talking about today is information management, information architecture, something to do with information. What are you going to put into your SharePoint site? We're going to go through definitions. What happens if you don't do it? How many of you have SharePoint already? I suppose most of you do. How many of you work for a large organisation that has legal requirements for keeping your information? How many work for companies that must keep information because of legal requirements? I suspect that some people don't know they ought to be keeping stuff because everybody's hand should have gone up. If you're in a company, the most important thing you need to do is keep your tax records for 7 years. How many people do that? Is it in SharePoint? I don't know. Go in there. Considerations regarding information management, and then a bit about SharePoint in particular. So what to do, hints to what not to do. Questions, I'll take questions as we go along. I'm not going to wait till the end. It makes a more interesting conversation. I know my first one, we got stopped. Not stopped. We had a very good discussion on hybrid clouds, and by the end we covered everything but in an unstructured format. So, information governance. It's all about the ability to take your information, capture it. Where is it going to come from? Who creates it? Where is it going to go? Which is probably a lesser thing. But we're talking about capture of information. Classification. Which part of the term store, which part of the metadata does that actually belong? What are the uses of that information? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to keep it in place at the time? One important thing is about reduction. I work in the information management practice of HP, and we do an information optimization service which goes through and sorts out pre-migration or move-in from file shares to SharePoint, the actual classification of the data that's on there. One customer, they had 15.5 copies of the last year's SharePoint conference DVD on their SharePoint. People want to share, people put things in, they can't find this stuff, so therefore they put it onto a SharePoint site. Somebody else tries to find it, they can't. They put it onto another SharePoint site if you're allowed to, and then suddenly you just get loads and loads of information. Which brings us on to finding that information. So classification, finding. There's a session there's a session on Monday about search. If people can find what they want, they're not going to fill up the SharePoint site. So try to keep the information down. Reduction, cost. of that storage is not so important now, but if you're storing 15.5 gig of SharePoint conference DVDs and you only need to store one, you can save money. Retain and protect. How long do you need to keep that information? We'll go through some examples of how long you need to do that. What sort of protection do you need? Does it need to be encrypted? Has anybody actually used the SQL encryption that runs underneath SharePoint? No. Because of the area I work in, if you ever need to do the TDE, then start it running on the Friday night and it might be finished by Monday morning. The encryption just takes such a long time on SQL. So protection. And then discover. So how are you going to let people look at that information? How are you going to find out where that is and who actually needs access to it? And then probably the most important thing, dispose. Always think about how you're going to get rid of this stuff. Do you need it? Do you need it for 7 years? Do you need it for 1 year? Customer that I'm working with at the moment, we have a policy of anything on SharePoint that hasn't been referenced or updated within 18 months is automatically deleted. Some people will be saying, but you can't automatically delete any data. Well, we can. The users might get a bit upset, but if you've been communicating with them that this happens, it hasn't been used, and it hasn't actually been put into the records management or the archive area, then it's quite easy to be disposed. Inside of HP, we have a similar thing that we get an email saying, this site hasn't been used for 6 months. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to keep it, delete it, or whatever? And then you get a little option to say, yes, some of this wants to go into our records management area, some doesn't. And you need that in place, so you're controlling what goes on there. So why do customers do information management? The real reason, based on the information management initiatives that mid-sized and large organisations Computerwell study, I can't remember which year it is they want to do better decision making. If you've got the right information to the right people at the right time, this is the Martini principle for those who are old enough to remember the adverts, then you can make better decisions. If you have got too much information, people will just turn off. If you haven't got enough information, then you might make the wrong decision. Reduced costs is quite high on there. I'm looking at a customer who has 798 terabytes of file shares that they want to put onto SharePoint. What's the maximum size of a SharePoint farm, please? According to Microsoft, there is one. 100 terabytes.
I spoke to the guy yesterday and he said, no, you don't need to worry about it. They'll go on forever. It's just performance.
They will go on forever, but you have to put in new farms.
Okay.
Yes. I think it might change in 2016. There's some stuff going on around there. So this customer says, we've got these file shares, we just want to transfer everything onto SharePoint. So 700 and some odd terabytes, 100 terabytes of farm, so that's 8 farms. But you've got to think about your log files, you've got to think about your search indexes and everything else, so it just expands and expands. So, what stuff have they got on their file shares? Anybody hazard a guess? Rubbish, yes.
Seismic data, judging by the size.
Sorry?
Seismic data, judging by the size.
Yeah, probably. Load of AutoCAD, load of operating procedures, loads of seismic stuff.
Lots of duplication.
Lots of duplication. Lots of duplication. So for them, we are running this optimization service, and that's where we found the 15.5 copies of SharePoint on there. And there is a graph of how old that information is. They've been using file shares forever, and it just keeps going and going and going. So there's lots of stuff over 10 years old. There's lots of stuff between 10 and 5-year-olds. Some of it they might need, some of it they probably don't. So what we're trying to do is to reduce this so that we can build their SharePoint. In fact, in this case, it's on-premise. It would be easy if we go into Office 365, but we can't, because we just say to Microsoft, here's all this data, we'll pay for it. But you don't want to do that because you can't find anything. And then we get improved workforce effectiveness, which is a bit around decision making. And we're also ensuring that we meet our compliance regulations and mitigate risk. So, information architecture. Yes. This is the official Microsoft view from the MSDN and really goes down into the particulars with SharePoint. So, the Microsoft view of the world is the information architecture determines how the information in that site or solution is organised and presented to the site's users. It's often recorded as a hierarchical list of content. I like to argue with that one because we probably need to have it more for those. I can't even say the word this morning, but instead of hierarchical, just wide and long. And it's all about your search of the content, data types, keywords, and other concepts. So before you do anything about SharePoint, before you even put the CD in, you need to think about what stuff it's going to be used for. A little diversion into records management. And most people's view of records management is like Dilbert on this one. You put the information into records management and nobody ever uses it, so you might as well just destroy it. Which is fine, and generally, most of the organisations that have records management, they don't want anything. You never reference them again, and you just dispose of the information as it's there. Until somebody comes out. So what happens if you don't do anything? Sorry, one step back. You noticed, or you may have noticed, that I've gone information management, information governance, information architecture, whatever you want to call it, I'm happy with it as long as you do it. Information architecture is generally the real stuff that you do on the setting up the SharePoints. So what happens if you don't? Most data has a life cycle. And generally, there's a lot of probability of reuse at the beginning of that document. So I'm just talking documents here. So you do a Visio design for your SharePoint farm. There's lots of people give you lots of feedback, and you increase the farm, decrease the farm. You write a procedure. People check it. You're sharing it with them using SharePoint, and there is a lot of reuse of that document. As it gets more and more mature, then there's probably only little tweaks going on. So over time, you will get the document just changing you'll get the document changing not very often. The classic example I use is a proposal to a customer, saying we will build your SharePoint farm for £1 million. And at the end of that, we send out that proposal to the customer, and that is a legal document. After that, there's probably no reuse of that document at all. As we do more and more of proposals in this case, you'll find that the amount of data in your SharePoint farm increases. How many of you have lived in your house for more than 5 years? When you first moved in, I assume that you go from a smaller to bigger house. When you first moved in, did you have plenty of space to store stuff? Yep. Do you now have plenty of space to store stuff? So we're doing the same in SharePoint. We just keep putting stuff in there. And when you run out of space with IT, you just have another SharePoint farm built. If you're in the cloud, you just say to Microsoft or the other provider, right, I need a bit more space and I'll pay some money for it. So you just keep expanding. Yeah, okay. There are some forced events, and this is particularly talking about on-premise environments. So if you've got 2013 at the moment and you're going to go up to 2016 when it comes out, then you will do something about your SharePoint stuff. And you'll find that these events, you'll do a bit of consolidation. So this is a extracted piece of a customer who has that amount of data. They've upgraded to 2010, increases, they've upgraded to 2013, and they just do a bit of consolidation. We in HP, we're going through that because we're splitting out into two companies, so we keep getting emails saying, do you really want this data? But the general thing is that you will just keep increasing the amount of stuff that you keep over time. There may be some limitations. You may only have say 128 terabytes of space to play with, and when you do that, you then do something about it. But wouldn't it be better if you just used what you needed to use? That's not my phone, but it is my message sound. So in on-premise days, and probably with the cloud, you won't see all the SharePoint stuff, but you started with a load of SharePoint and you get even more SharePoint with a load of stuff that's in there. So how many of you actually recognise this scenario? How many people, you can be honest with me, how many people don't really do any information management on their SharePoint sites? I'm glad the HP guys didn't put their hand up, because I know they'd be lying. We do quite a lot, but then we've been doing it for ages and ages. So, two things about that. One, you're paying for the storage. Two, you might have stuff that you shouldn't have in that repository. Or alternative, and probably the rarest one, is that you haven't got the stuff you should have in that repository if you don't put rules and policies around it. So considerations for the business and the IT, there are two separate areas that are supposedly contradictory. And for the business outcomes, they need better decision making and to be able to increase their time to market for whatever they're trying to do. They need to be able to give information for discovery and accessibility. And they probably need to do improve their business process efficiencies. From the IT point of view, and whether this is on the cloud or whatever, you want to improve operational efficiency by having less data on there. And less data equals less backup time, less restoration time, less tapes if you're still using tapes, and all sorts of things. You also want to improve the information control. And so what stuff comes in, what stuff stays in there. And you want to manage the data according to the business needs over time. From both points of view, from IT and from the business, it was all about reducing cost, mitigating risk, and improving value. Virgil was saying this morning that, about planning, that if you're ever going to do something about a SharePoint project, start planning 6 months, communicating with the users. You need to start planning about what information you're going to have in your SharePoint. Are you going to release SharePoint directly with every single feature turned on? Are you going to, if you can, are you going to just say, we will do document collaboration first, and then 6 months later we'll do BI. Sorry, Excel spreadsheets, Excel services. Then we'll do BI. So have a phased approach of going there. Understand what information you really need to put in. We did a business track, which was 3 days, 3 years ago. 3 days of all the business people being in the same sessions for those 3 days. We got onto installing SharePoint on day 3. We did the governance, we did the information architecture, information management, we did setting up search. Because if people can't find the stuff, then how are you going to get the stuff out? And setting up search is all about the content types, the managed metadata, and how that is set up. And if you're producing intranet sites based on the metadata, and you have the navigation there, you need to get the metadata right before the screens appear properly on, or as you expect them on the on your SharePoint. So, plan. I've talked about this already, and it's just to reinforce that documents have their own life. A lot of activity. I've missed the ACT off the diagram. This is from one of our transformation experience workshops where you don't use any PowerPoint at all and you just draw. So a lot of documents. At some point, it might become a record, it might not. What do you do if it doesn't become a record? What do you do? And then at the end, you either dispose or archive it. Excuse me. So a pretty part of this is business relevance, time after creation. There is I don't know if it's a law, but there's a law that all of the known truths that you know at the moment 20% of the known truths that you know at the moment will not be valid in 2 years' time. So, business relevant, you might change the way that your business is doing. I'm trying to frantically think of a demo for a example of that. But what it's saying is that we have a lot of immediate needs. We need to look at accountability. For the proposal, this is setting up the proposal. The accountability is the delivering of the information to the user. So what have we actually signed up for? What have the customers signed up for? And then, if anything goes wrong, seeking evidence. So I'm working on an area with one of our county councils at the moment where we are doing information regarding troubled families and children at risk. We searched through about 16 external data sources. So from the police, from social services, from charity organisations, from the fire brigade, from hospitals. And we take, there's a series of rules and the information gets ranked, and if the ranking is above a certain figure, it comes out and say, this is a troubled family. So troubled families are families that may need extra support. So once we've got all the information in, we go and seek the evidence for that. We might also, in a different scenario, reuse that. So knowledge management. Inside of HP, we do lots of proposals, we do lots of SharePoint proposals, and we have a little SharePoint site that has proposals in it. It's moved recently because we're changing all our inside SharePoints, but we want to be able to reuse everything. I do not like having to work and create a brand new proposal when somebody else has done it before me and I can just take that information. Not because I'm lazy, well yes I am slightly lazy in some cases, but somebody has already done it and you can just do that, take it and bring it. So, reuse. We, in the information management area, have a SharePoint website that's got little sections of all the bits and pieces that we need, and we'll just bring in, we're going to do an information transformation experience workshop, and we need 2 people, we need this information from the customer, so it's got all the questionnaires in there, and we just create a brand new site for that particular customer, and we're reusing everything. Future reference, yeah, that's just for going on and on forever. Tax, for the work I did with the tax office, after 7 years, all the information disappeared. But they are very focused. They just collect tax, and it's not the UK tax office, so they do something else. How many people can find the information they want at the right time in their SharePoint areas?
Sure.
Yes, sure, of course you can. So, if you haven't set up the information management, if you haven't set up the information architecture, eventually somebody will come along and say, I know there was something that I needed to find. Where is this stuff? I've no idea. How could I know where you stored your particular document? Should be able to search for it. Some people say that information discovery is the ability to search your stores. You probably will find 90% of your stuff, but there's always some stuff that you won't be able to search for. And then something happens and the legal people get involved. You are then, under freedom of information, I think you have 10 working days to produce any information. And you've got to produce it, everything that you've got. And if it's sat on somebody's mobile phone or PC as part of the OneDrive, their offline OneDrive that you don't have searching capability over, then you could be liable for lots of fines, or in the worst case, your CIO could go to jail. I've never seen that happen, but it's the stick that goes on. And what we're trying to do with the Troubled Families system, which is called the Information Management Hub, is that is the place where everybody can go to find that. We have spent with this customer a year. We have only just been doing anything on SharePoint. We have been going through their classifications, their data sources, what's on their data sources. We have been looking at digitising their paper because it's related to families, people, etc. There is information in vaults, record vaults with the big handles that you move along that we need to bring in. So we're digitising that as well. But we need to know how we're going to digitise it. We need to know the metadata around it, what's it used for, what's its life cycle retention. In some cases, it will, for children, it's 10 years after their 18th birthday. For the pension department I was working for, it is 10 years after the death of the second beneficiary to that pension, or the dead plus 10 retention, as we called it. So I work until I'm 90 at the moment. I think that's, no, it's I got a very nasty letter from the government saying, congratulations, your retirement age has been increased to, thinking, damn, that's another 2 years of working. So I work for an extra 2 years, I take my pension, I die, I then transfer my pension to my, my dependents, and they keep living. So it could be, it could be a very long time. And then you've got another 10 years to keep on to it. And during that time, if there's any problems with what's being paid, etc., you might need to get from there. Okay. Yeah. For the same document type, you might have different value placed with that particular document. This is where something happens that you will have to refer, i.e. the legal case where you have to refer to that particular document. In normal life, document 2 has been worked upon, a lot of value at the start. After the year end, it probably goes down and just needs to be there kept as reference. If something does happen, like the legal case comes in, then you need to find that document. You need to be able to bring that back. And you need to think about your information. Is there any of this in your area? Do you have to cater for this? I would suggest that most people do. So don't think that you've just got a document set and that's it, and it will live for as a record for 2 years or 7 years or whatever. There might be some cases where you're taken to court because you are not providing services as per the contract. I was speaking last night to one of my colleagues who, he's an independent contractor and he hadn't got paid for some work that he was doing, and he had to take the customer to court. He had all this stuff for him. He had it. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to be paid. And the people were complaining about that. Took it to the small courts. He could produce this information, and he won the case. Very extreme example, but if you don't know what you got and what you're doing, keeping it in there. So SharePoint Specifics. As I was discussing with David earlier, there is lots of good information relating to how you build SharePoint, information that you need to do in particular with SharePoint. It's all on MSDN, and this is some of the stuff we talk about. Metadata. What is your metadata? Do you really need it? Is it going to change over time? Are you going to allow people to put in new metadata into your SharePoint sites? I was working for a large car manufacturer, and they had defined their term store and metadata, and they had under engine development petrol, diesel, hybrid, I think that's it, horse-drawn, no steam, no. But the R&D people were working on hydrogen engines, and they couldn't actually classify hydrogen engines into their term store and metadata. Do you want people to be able to create metadata? You may do. You may not. Generally, I don't like people creating things. I like things that are dull and stable and whatever. And if you need a new term store, then somebody will say, "Oi, can we have hydrogen in there?" And then somebody does something about it. If you allow too many people to if you allow everybody to create metadata, you will get different terms for the same information. Particularly interesting for international companies where different terms mean the same thing and terms mean different things, so you need to control that. Content types, yes, related to metadata. The term store, all setting up there. Are you going to do versions? In the notes on this, on the slides that you'll get, is the link to the MSDN side that we're talking about here, and there's lots of other links there. Do you want versions on your documents? Versions of documents are good because you can get back to the previous one if you need to. They might not be good because you're increasing the usage of your SharePoint store. Defining record sets is really good. For our proposals, we have a document set, not a record set, a document set. And in there, we have specified we need an Excel spreadsheet that does information, that tells you how much this thing is going to cost, the proposal, all the working out of how much it's going to cost us, how much profit margin we're going to charge to the customer. Because we are all here to make money so that we can live a good life. Or does somebody work for a charity? No. Well, yeah. But basically, we're all in this to make money, and you've got to have the margins. So I'll come back to sets later. And where are all your records? Touched on the navigation. Manage metadata to navigate through your structure of your websites. Search. Really, really important, setting it up. If you didn't see Joel Olson's session on Monday, I would suggest you go and have another look at that. He talks about a lot of useful stuff in there. And then your publishing strategy. So what are you going to publish to your external sites, intranet sites? Are you going to have, as one of my customers has got, they've got Office 365 running their intranet, and they're publishing to a third-party extranet and external publishing supplier from their cloud. So, can you do that? What needs to be changed? What sort of information are you going to be putting out there? Virgil talked on that this morning about setting up the intranet for his particular customer. We've done similar regarding communications. So how are you going to communicate through that? And that's all about the information you need to put over. So this is the term store from one of our customers, and it's actually on our own 365 tenant. And what we've done is to take the classification that we've built and put it into here, so that when we do the storage, when we do the declare it as a record, we can match up the SharePoint site collections and document libraries with the particular area where they need to be stored. So if somebody is working in libraries, leisure and culture, we have a site collection for leisure and culture. We have certain areas that are team sites in that are related to the arts team, the libraries team. And those team sites map to this particular part of the term store, so that when they store any document into that team library, we know that in 90% of the cases, that if that is a record, it will have to go into this part of the record tree. We're using a third-party records management system, and we take and this mirrors the term store. This mirrors the classification store on the records manager, and we feed, because that's the authoritative one, we feed that structure into there. So when I'm working in libraries, all I can see is that bit, and I get a choice of, well, in most cases I don't get a choice, I just put it just automatically put into there. So we're talking about zero-click compliance, because if you allow the users to put in their own metadata, they will choose the default options, and the default option is somewhere up here on this one. Or if they actually do click on the click down list and you allow them to put anything in, they'll put things like Mickey Mouse or Pluto or other stuff. I don't know how true it is today, but in 2009, the most common term that was put under for metadata was Mickey Mouse. I think it's changed since then because we've got clever about this. So you need to think, what is the information going to be used for? You need to think, what site collection is this particularly going to be, which area is this going to be used for, and how can we make it so that we get the right metadata assigned to the documents when they go in automatically. This is a very, very old customer example. It's a manufacturing customer who had a project approval from SAP, and once they did that, they created a team site, and they populated with standard documents, and then they initiated workflows. They did a load of collaborative working, and at the end of it, they've got the documents completed, and then they retained it in the records management system for future use and also for patents. So the example I use is cinnamon chocolate for Christmas. So has anybody seen a cinnamon chocolate bar out in their travels? No. Because it wasn't successful, they weren't going to make enough money, but they've still got the patent on it, so that if anybody else tries to do cinnamon chocolate bars, then these people could come along and say, but that's our patent, therefore you owe us lots of money. So you're protecting your IP as well in this, and that's one of the things that you need to think about out there. When the information came to be destroyed, when the project finished, there was an internal workflow that was set up on the SharePoint side to put all the stuff into the records management. We had the Documentum connector working for that one. How much information in SharePoint is really current? I like to suggest about 10%. So you're storing quite a lot of stuff that is really reference data. Does it need to be in SharePoint? One customer that I was working with actually put it into the old Trim records management, and so they had this searchable from the SharePoint and the critical data in there. They cut down about 3 farms on this one. We do something similar to this, and our SharePoint estate is about 128 terabytes, and that's been about that for the past 6 years, 7 years. We've got 300,000 users. So 128 terabytes isn't that bad. It's only a small portion per person. Going from there. Yeah. So, call to action. Plan. Those who fail to plan, plan to fail. I think that was MacArthur's quote, and he spent ages planning the D-Day invasion. You need to think about what you're doing with your data, what data it is, what data you shouldn't have on there. Should you put CAD drawings onto your SharePoint environment? If you're on premise, then there's a third party that will handle the greater than 2 gig size. If you're going on to the cloud, Office 365, then you're stuck with that limit. value your information. What's critical, what's not critical. What sort of workloads are you going to be doing? So this is all to do with the AIM view of the world. So you capture the documents, you store them, you deliver, you preserve them. There's different stuff you need to do at different at the stage of the lifestyle of that particular document. Which location? So the three locations you've got are cloud, on-premise, hybrid, not at all, elsewhere. Cloud really good for for just getting the stuff up there, and you can keep it going. If you value your information, can you actually have that data in the cloud? Are you limited because of your organisation to having information in UK data centres? So if you are, you can't use Office 365. There are other providers who will provide UK data centres, and there are other people who will provide Office 365 in UK data centres. HP is one of them that's doing it at the moment. So, or do you want hybrid stuff? Do you want the working documents in the cloud and then bring your records on-premise? If there's only one thing you do, just put a standard rule on your SharePoint to say, after 18 months, get rid of the data. Just do a bit of housekeeping, and then you won't be filling up your house. And sort out your SharePoint stuff. So it's all very easy, as Virgil said this morning, to build a SharePoint thing, and people use it and they don't really know what they're doing. They put stuff in the wrong place, and so you need to talk about setting up your search, your rules and your metadata. So I'm slightly over, my apologies for that, but am I slightly over? No. So I had it in, I was finishing at, I shouldn't have had that last gin and tonic last night. So yeah, sort out your SharePoint stuff, search rules and metadata. So that's a very quick tour of information governance, information management. It doesn't apply only to SharePoint. It applies to anything that you're doing with it, with anything inside of your organisation. How many of you have file shares? Do you know what's on it? Yeah. Files. Do you know what the business value of that information is? Do you know who the owner is? One of the things that we find is that when we do our information optimization, we can condense the amount of data by at least 30%. So there's 30% of stuff that isn't used on there. And then we can go in and build the classification from the information that we get out of the metadata and also out of the documents. So we go through the documents. So I shall let you go early. Thank you for your time. Any questions, come up and see me. And thank you very much for attending.